we start the year in death metal, off with a new album from one of the classics again. Very nice timing for us. We gave Obituary their first real moment to shine on TNM over the summer with a look at Slowly We Rot. Their new album, Dying of Everything, is here, and it's really nice having spoken about their first album from almost 35 years ago and then jump straight to their new one and have it tickle like exactly the same spot. It's so homely. It's like putting on a familiar pair of swamp shoes.
Oh, mate, this album fucking rips. Like, but again, yeah, it like I put it on. I was like, oh, this just sounds like it could have come from the late 80s, early 90s. It's so just of that classic. Again, I have really started to get more into a lot of classic death metal since doing the death special. It has been like my kind of like, oh hell yeah, I really do like death metal now. And getting a new Obituary album, and again, like, I've not gone into every Obituary album between this and the debut, so I don't know, has every album been of this quality? But like,
not everyone's been of this quality. They do all roughly sound the same.
Yeah, no. I get that, and I'm like, do you know what? When you got this sound and it hits that spot so perfectly, I'm fine with that. I don't, but like I said, I don't know if this is a late career high for Obituary or if it was good, but I just felt so like, this is just hitting all the right buttons for me.
Yeah, Elliot, when it comes to a new record from a band like Obituary, like, what are you wanting, and did this live up to that?
Obituary are kind of like a Yorkie bar. It's like, there's no nuts or caramel or biscuits. It's just the distilled wonder of death metal in its purest form. In fact, on Slowly We Rot, it's like they're barely even songwriters. It's just like, how gross can we be the whole time? And so for a band like Obituary, that in principle, you think that's quite a limiting thing. How many Yorkie bars do I need? And
I love Yorkies. Like, genuinely, I do.
Mate, just drop it. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
This is the thing. The last, I don't know if they really went away, but the last two records, Inked with Blood and the self-titled, I wasn't all that keen on them. Like, the former felt kind of devoid of excitement, and the self-titled was a bit more up-tempo, but it ended up being a slightly faceless record. This is much more like it. So for Obituary, I didn't have very high expectations at all, but this has just been... It's like the biggest, most delicious Yorkie bar you can have. I think this analogy might have run its course now, but this record is a fucking wicked addition to the catalogue.
Yeah, again, like, cards on the table. Obituary are one of like that school of classic death metal bands who I'm not really expecting classics from at this stage in the game. Like, there are some, most notably Cannibal Corpse, where their ceiling still goes sky high. Obituary have been consistently reliable for pretty much their entire existence, but their essential records are their first two. Their next two are not quite so classic, but still fairly classic, and then everything else is just affirming bonus. I did say something similar about Immolation last year, and I was so pleased to have their new record go like above and beyond, and I made a point of saying, you can't write any of these bands off and put them in a box. I don't think Obituary have quite done that, but there are moments where they make you stand up and really make you pay attention and remind you of why they are revered. I think for me, if we look back at their last few records, Inked in Blood, that one does get a bit of a bad rep. I thought there was some good songs that shone in the live environment, particularly that one. I think their 2017 album was, like, at the time, it was very, very popular. 6 years later, we get this, and it feels like no time has passed in their world. Like, the only real indication that we are when we are is, I think this will probably turn out to be the last metal album to have a Mariusz Lewandowski cover, as it must have been one of the last ones that he'd done before he died. And it's like, well, we've come a long way there from a bloke face down rotting in a gutter. But like, when you just hear a guitar tone like that, and that voice joining in, even more the guitar tone though, really, and these kind of riffs, it's just like, unmistakable. You don't get this exact sound anywhere else, even with the amount of newer death metal bands who have taken some kind of form of influence from Obituary.
Well, I wonder if maybe more modern metal bands, maybe they feel like they can't actually do that much with this sound. Because Obituary, God love them, they don't always do that much with this sound. Like, it's entirely theirs, and they don't really explore that much about it. But having that, the fact they have so much personality, and as you say, immediately identifiable in a genre which is famously pretty obtuse, and they're even perhaps more basic than a lot of their peers at the time. The fact that this far into their career they're able to release an album that I think is of a really high standard, it's just, this has made my week. It's cheered me, because I had pretty much no expectations, and then when Barely Alive comes in, which I think I read a thing earlier saying it is the fastest Obituary song.
Yeah, BPM wise, yeah.
Donald Tardy sounds really unhappy about that. It's like, what have I done? I've set myself up to fail here. But yeah, from the off, it was like, oh, this is more invigorating than they've sounded since maybe even like World Demise.
Yeah, I think that the biggest Obituary moment of the 21st century, weirdly, is an instrumental, because it's Redneck Stomp that opens Frozen Time, and then they've opened every one of their like shows with that ever since, as like a full-on, you know, Obituary banger. Maybe this is the best one of the 21st century. I don't know. Like, the art of simplicity is really their forte. It's part of the reason why they might be perceived as having less of a high ceiling than some of their more ambitious peers. But when they land on the right couple of riffs, there is something so primal about how they land. Like, War is so simple, and it's consciously so, but also they have, around that simplicity, there's a couple of embellishments with, you know, there's the kind of disgusting voices hanging in the air, just like, whoa, and there are a couple of, like, surprisingly fanciful leads as well, and there's a point when they all drop out and there's an acoustic that brings the riff back in. It's like a moment of dynamics in my Obituary record. It's more likely than you think. But the groove itself is so simple.
Such a headbanger, though.
Yeah,
like,
but they're taking care in how they arrange it, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm fine with the simplicity of this record. When it begins with Barely Alive, I mean, that song alone is like responsible for me liking this record so much. It just puts me in the best mood.
Yeah.
The moment that song just tears in, and it's just this white knuckle, like, gets your blood pumping. All of the riffs, they do the Slayer bits. It's got that right balance between kind of like enough precision while still being like gritty and mucky and like horrible when it's like Barely Alive, when he's just screaming that, like, and it's just like across the record, John Tardy is just spitting bile out the whole record, as you'd expect from him, like similar to what he said when we did Slowly We Rot. But it's just like, what do you want? Do you want riffs? Do you want just like nasty sounds, like big headbang bits, kind of cool lead guitars every now and then? They're just across all these songs, and it's just kind of like, yeah, just more of that, please. Just keep piling up my plate.
Yeah, like, there's some bits of War in Will to Live as well. They kind of do build there's moments of detail in, but I mean, a lot of the riffs are fairly interchangeable. There's just a lot of steamroller groove riffs, like, you know, The Wrong Time is another one, but there's just this primal heartbeat to it where, like, Without a Conscience is pure bob your head on a steady groove and just check out how horrible we can make this guitar sound.
It's got loads of swing on it, though, in that low end, like, just so much heft.
And it does, like, the breakdown parts as well, like when they just like hammer on that ride and the riff in the latter section of that, and then you put a bunch of them all together as a record, you come to feel for them as like a real slug unit, you know? Like, not one of them is stepping out of line. No one's really going for the limelight. It's just 5 dudes slugging through the trenches, heads down, really committed to achieving the same kind of rotting groove. In that, I think the title track is cool when it has like the gurgling kind of bass up in the forefront before the thrash parts hits. I think By the Dawn, when that like double bass nastiness just takes over and rolls forward, really cool. And that has a tightness maybe they don't always kind of prioritize. John brings it in with a nice like, ugh.
I mean, The Wrong Time, when it begins with that before the riff kicks in, like, more of that. That's what I want. Like,
it's the AC/DC thing. It's like when you go see them, it's just 5 guys keeping it as basic as possible, all working towards the same goal. And in the form of death metal, it's such an infectious, likable thing. And it's funny, like, as you say, a lot of these riffs are interchangeable, but doing the notes for this, I just kept writing down songs. I was like, this is great, The Wrong Time is brilliant, Be Warned's been stuck in my head, the title track's great. It's one of those things where it's almost hard to explain to someone what makes this album so good and so likable. You kind of have to already like it. It's hard to convince anyone of this record. You kind of have to be in to understand why it's so enjoyable.
Yeah, like, I think the middle kind of chunk of this record is just like that really satisfying, you know, sandwich or Yorkie bar or whatever. I think the couple bits where they go above and beyond, the bookends, I think, do stand out. Because
Be Warned is such a good closer.
Well, because like Barely Alive, like you said, I agree with you, Sam. That's one of my favourite Obituary songs in fucking ages, and it probably is because it's the fastest Obituary song ever. But the bit when like it goes all Angel of Death with the breakdown part and like the ride cymbals just going through the whole thing, it's thrilling, genuinely, and it's all held down as well by the way John uses his voice on that hook, which, if you want an example of why what John Tardy does is great, it's just the way he takes words and utterances like that and he turns them into these howls that are about the way they sound in his mouth, you know, not the words themselves, just that like, it's wicked. And then Be Warned does the opposite, where that riff is fucking like diabolically stinky from literally the second the song starts. And you've had so much Obituary up to that point. It's impressive to make, like, you know, that impact of that guitar tone and everything being even more fucking honking at the last moment. It's like Obituary doing what they do, but taking it to like an autopsy or a mortician place or something. Just like pure blood and grime that you can't wash out.
Yeah, it's such an evil sound to end the record as well. Like, again, like Obituary, they've sounded evil and nice throughout the record, but then when they get to that and like he's in those like really deep like guttural vocals and like it's so nasty, and it does just end the record in a really memorable way. And I think, like I say, bookending them with these two tracks, which do really different things in that, like I say, Bare Life, all pace, all attack, and Be Warned a lot more kind of like creeping and menacing. Like it's such a strong, memorable way to end it.
Well, it might be the first time that I think Obituary have sounded sort of infernal. Like, they've sounded woozy and slimy before, but they've not really had that sort of imperious, you know, hellfire.
It sounds like the album cover.
Exactly, yeah. And so, as you were saying, as a closer, to be refreshed and to get, you know, another hit like that so late in the game, where most bands would just sort of run it out with filler. You know, Obituary don't have to put together an album, really. They just have to put together one or two songs that you like, but I like pretty much everything on this, and the fact it goes out on the best or second best song is just, I think it shows real, it's weird to use the word craft in an Obituary review, but like, yeah, again, it's hard to explain why this album's so such a career high this point in this late in their career. I'm rambling.
Yeah. I mean, like, incidentally, I wish that Autopsy album had come a few months later around now, so we'd had space to cover it, because that's great as well. But I mean, yeah, this is another very solid Obituary record. It probably is one of the better ones of their recent output. Cool analog sound as well, like the snare sounds like you're in the practice room with it. Good. Obituary, dying of everything.